What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Well, kinda. You guys know about the last video. I showed my face and stuff like that. Well, turns out I didn't do such a great job, to be honest. Looking back, yeah, I didn't do a great job, and I'll just wait until I get a new camera, new equipment, stuff like that, and then we'll just go all out. But for now, let's go back to how it was. We'll just add more clips if we can. And yeah, that's what we're gonna do today. Today, I'm gonna be talking about Jeff Jarrett and how he managed to get one over Vince. Classic tale. This is so deep in the annals of pro wrestling lore. Jeff Jarrett managing to get one over Vince. Like, how was that possible? How? Well, let me answer the question for you. He had so much leverage during the negotiating process that it was basically impractical for Vince to turn him down. He really depended on Jarrett to proceed and wrestle that night. Unfortunately for Double J, though, he really felt the "don't cross the boss" quote a couple of years later. Now, I want you guys to give me some ideas like this. I want to cover some backstage stories. I need some backstage stories. We gotta make this a series if this is successful. So yeah, please comment down below some stories. What do you guys want? Backstage fight stories? I don't know, but just please comment down below an idea that you got like this. Some stories, basically. Now in this video, I cover that entire situation. Jeff Jarrett versus Vince to pay him right on the spot. So for me to cover this one, I gotta give you guys a backstory as to how Vince and Jeff got to the point where fists were about to fly in Cleveland. Now, if you want to skip over, look at the description down below. I put a timestamp down there for those of you that aren't patient, as I'm going to cover Jarrett's career up to that point. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, as you may know, Jeff Jarrett, Double J, he was the son of the well-known promoter Jarrett. He wrestled in his father's promotions, including CWA and eventually the United States Wrestling Association. Presently, during this time period, Jeff's father had a great relationship with Vince McMahon. This meant both promotions exchanged talent. At one point, Vince himself worked as a heel in the USWA, and Vince's bond with Jerry was so tight that rumor has it, and please don't call me out on that, I heard it before, Jerry would have taken over the WWF if Vince was convicted of those crimes. That's a whole other story in itself, but with that said, Vince managed to beat the case, and he didn't go to jail. Around this time period, when Vince beat the case, Jeff Jarrett was brought into the World Wrestling Federation. His gimmick was that of a country singer. Now, I believe he claimed to have made hits, and Jacqueline was initially his manager, but she suffered an injury and she wouldn't be seen in the Fed up until 1998. Vignettes aired of Jarrett signaling his arrival, and the fans had an idea of who Double J was. He insulted a bunch of country stars such as Willie Nelson, Billy Ray Cyrus, and he claimed to be the best country star out there. He was out to use the WWF to benefit and launch his career, therefore becoming the biggest star in the world. Upon his debut, Jarrett was thrusted right into the mid-card scene. They treated him like a somewhat big deal, not a main event or anything resembling that, but like a notable part of the show. Like, this guy, he's a mid-carder, a solid one. Double J's defining moment would come at the 1995 Royal Rumble. Now, before I get to it, first of all, he had a roadie that followed him everywhere. You may know the roadie as the Road Dogg. As for the Rumble, he defeated Razor Ramon to capture the Intercontinental Championship. Let me explain something. During the New Generation era, the IC title was a semblance of prestige and honor. If you held that title, either they had big plans for you or you were the workhorse of the WWF. Double J held the title for 4 months before losing it to Bob Holly. The result wasn't official, and due to both men having a claim to the title, it was vacated. Later that night, however, Jarrett recaptured the title, becoming a 2-time champ in the process. But then, 3 weeks later, Jarrett was a 3-time champion. Why? Well, Razor beat him for the gold at a live event, and then 2 days later, Double J reclaimed the title. So basically, he won and lost the title. During this time period, Jeff Jarrett's storyline was having fun. He was a 3-time champion, and he tried showing off some of his music skills. He had a hit single by the name of With My Baby Tonight, and that song, it was a bop. As for Jarrett off-screen, well, he wasn't pleased with the booking and the direction of his character. He was losing to everyone, but that wasn't a bad thing, as WWF saw him as a utility player. Jarrett, though, he wanted more. Along with the roadie, they walked out of the company in July. Now, story goes, Road Dogg was going to turn into a babyface, and it was going to be revealed that he actually sang the song, not Jarrett, who was just lip-syncing. I heard something about Jarrett being worried about Roadie getting drug tested and failing, therefore being fired in the process, and Jarrett would be left without a viable opponent, and he would go back to losing. Jarrett did return in December, but he left in January of 1996, and when he did, the Roadie didn't follow along. Apparently, WCW had no room for Jesse James, so he returned to the WWF, and he began singing With My Baby Tonight for about a year and a half before forming the New Age Outlaws with Billy Gunn. Now, Jarrett leaving the WWF, I believe it was due to a contract dispute and stuff like that, so this was only the beginning in the very toxic relationship between Vince and Jeff Jarrett. Anyways, with that said, Jarrett moved to WCW where he had a subpar run. I mean, he was a part of the new Four Horsemen. He did win the U.S. title, but he was better off remaining in the WWF. I mean, not much changed by the looks of it. He could have been a bigger star had he remained in the WWF. He once again decided to not renew his contract, and he opted to return to the WWF. On the October 20th, 1997 episode of Raw, Jeff Jarrett appeared for the first time in nearly 2 years in a WWF ring. He delivered a worked shoot on Eric Bischoff, citing his time in WCW to be limited, and he wasn't able to fly due to him. He said that Bischoff made him drown in mediocrity, and he turned around and cut a promo on Vince stating that he did this too, and unlike Eazy-E, Vince was experienced and he knew exactly what he was doing. He trashed the country music character and he promised to make an impact. Double J even called out a couple of the main eventers. In particular, he called out Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. His remarks towards Austin rubbed the Texas Rattlesnake the wrong way. He didn't need to go there because there was no plan for a feud between the two. He said something about Austin 3:16 being blasphemous to him and it's insulting to his Christian faith. He also said that Austin will always be the ringmaster to him, and the fact that Jarrett pissed him off 8 years earlier, well, any glimmer of hope for the main event program between these two was dashed. Like, there wasn't even a plan for these two to come in and feud, but this promo kind of ruined things anyways. Like, Austin, I believe he already refused to work with him because of the stuff that happened in his father's promotion. I mean, Jarrett could have probably worked out as a, stopgap feud in, July or something for Austin before SummerSlam. But yeah, he wasn't going to work a long-term feud with Austin, and even if he did, it wasn't even going to be long. It was going to be a one pay-per-view thing, so yeah. But Austin refused. With the Attitude Era swinging in full force, any and every talent that left either WCW or the WWF was treated like a big deal upon their debut. Jeff was a big deal, enough of a big deal for them to allow him to come to the ring and deliver a worked shoot. Afterwards, though, he wasn't doing much. He won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and big deal, right? Well, moments after capturing the title, he was on the receiving end of a Stone Cold Stunner. Now, despite shunning the country singer character, Double J reverted to being just that. He had the Godwins renamed Southern Justice work as his bodyguards, and this run wasn't even that notable though. Jeff Jarrett struggled to gain momentum or relevancy in the ever-changing landscape of the WWF. But after losing a hair versus hair match against X-Pac at SummerSlam, things would actually improve for Jarrett despite losing his long hair. Upon his return, he ditched that attire he had for most of his career. This new look fit in favor of the gritty Attitude Era. His new catchphrase was "Don't piss me off." He said something about slap nuts, and I think you may know that "Don't piss me off" best from WWF Attitude. Jeff Jarrett seized any association with Southern Justice, and he was paired with Deborah McMichael. With that said, slowly Jarrett started to get the crowd's attention. But it wasn't he who was over. It was actually Deborah who was over with the crowd. And I think you know why. I guess she appealed to most of the male crowd. This caught the Blue Blazer Owen Hart's attention, and after she was forced to take off her clothes, he ran out and clothed her. This led to Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett becoming a tag team. Now, this tag team really benefited Jarrett. It helped him get comfortable in a new role, and as for Owen, he was the tag team specialist. He had Yokozuna, he had the Bulldog, and now he's got Jarrett. And coupled with their already great relationship outside the ring, this was the perfect tag team. Personally watching them, I believe this role suited both men. Jarrett had to do something, Owen had to do something too after returning from retirement, and so the tag team gave the duo a platform to be a part of the show. Deborah was used as eye candy and as a real distraction for their opponents, and this tactic really worked on most nights. There was also the mystique of whether or not the Blue Blazer was going to appear. The duo held the gold for about 3 months, but unfortunately though, Owen Hart would shortly tragically pass away. Despite this loss, Jarrett competed a few minutes later with tears in his eyes. Now personally, I don't think about visiting that pay-per-view. It just had this weird feeling, and rightfully so. I mean, it's clear why. And the vibe that show gives, I can't even watch it, no. Moving on from that tragic night, Jeff Jarrett in Owen Hart's honor captured the Intercontinental Championship. Now during this run, Jeff showed just how much of a prick he was. First of all, he lost and won the title again to Edge, by the way, making him a 6-time Intercontinental Champion. He was pissing off the fans with his action. First notable moment has got to be when he called Ben Stiller and asked why he didn't think of casting Double J in his new movie. Stiller then answered Jarrett's question as to who his favorite WWF star was, and his response, well, the puppies. Jarrett decided to lock Stiller in the figure 4, and following this, he slowly became abusive towards Deborah, and he was dripping in gold. He had enough gold that he literally just handed Mark Henry the European Championship. This was because Henry turned out D-Lo the previous night at SummerSlam, and Jarrett decided, you know what, let's reward this guy. Then a couple of minutes later, he brought out his new valet, Miss Kitty. Following this, Jeff Jarrett showed his disdain towards women, and man was he hated. Here's a bunch of stuff that he did. On the September 6, 1999 episode of Raw, Jarrett faced Jacqueline in a non-title bout. He made her tap out to the figure 4, and then he blasted her with the damn guitar. This is a way of sending Chyna a message since he was facing her at Unforgiven. Over the next couple of weeks, Jarrett blasted the Moolah with a guitar, and he locked Mae Young in the figure 4. Deborah and Kitty weren't exactly pleased with Jarrett's actions. The crowd were loudly chanting, "Asshole, asshole." And following this, he locked Lillian Garcia in the figure 4 after she announced he lost the match to Luna. Any woman that just pissed him off, he went berserk. It didn't matter if you were a personality or even his ally. Hell, even the boss's daughter wasn't safe. Jarrett even locked a makeup lady in the figure 4. If that wasn't enough, well, he locked Deborah in the figure 4. So basically, Jeff Jarrett was a misogynist cunt. He finally got his comeuppance, though, when China blasted him with a frying pan and dressing him in an apron. If you even stare at him the wrong way, he'll give you a figure 4. Now, that match at Unforgiven didn't go China's way due to outside interference, but a rematch was made for No Mercy, and it was a good housekeeping match. Heading into the event, it was realized by JR, who was head talent of relations at this point, that Jeff Jarrett's contract was set to expire. He wanted to hold out, and the reason for this was because Jarrett the last time around was goaded into renewing his contract, and what that meant was he lost out on some money. He tried holding out for more money, but JR put him on the spot last time around. So this was a way of returning the favor. The WWF mistakenly kept Jarrett as champion heading into the pay-per-view, and this is the moment you've probably been waiting for. So Jarrett, he had all the leverage at this point. He couldn't be slotted out of that role and be replaced because China wouldn't return the favor to him. And second, and most importantly, he possessed the Intercontinental Championship. There was this fear that he was going to walk out of the company and go to WCW, and who knows, maybe even trash the second most prestigious title in the World Wrestling Federation. I mean, Medusa already did it, and now Vince, he was worried. Jarrett threw China in a damn laundry bin, and he threw her into the parking lot. So China, she needed to win, and not only that, but she needed to beat Jarrett himself. It didn't matter if they replaced Jarrett with The Rock. Double J was an absolute must for that night. Now, the fact that his contract was set to expire on October 16th, 1999, one night before the pay-per-view, was crazy. Also, you gotta hear this. Jarrett himself claimed that he wasn't out to hold up the WWF and exploit this loophole, no. He was out to claim the pay-per-view bonuses that they owed him. In Bob Holly's book, and that's a good one by the way, he touched on this topic. Here's an excerpt from the book, and I quote, "Jeff's contract was coming to an end and Jim Ross was told to sign him to an extension. For whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks and Jeff kept quiet about his contractual status. They had been building a match between Jeff and China for weeks. It was one of the featured matches at the No Mercy pay-per-view, and China was going to make history by becoming the first female IC champion. The pay-per-view was on Sunday, and it turned out that Jeff's contract had expired the day before. He walked into the arena for the pay-per-view without his gear, and he went straight to Vince. Backstage, we could all hear the yelling in Vince's office. Jeff was demanding that Vince pay him all the money he was owed from previous events, and the money for the match he was going to do that night, or he wasn't going to go out to the ring. Shane, Vince's son, was really vocal. He was cussing Jeff out and was ready to beat the out of him. Jeff is a mild-mannered guy who wouldn't fight anybody, so he just sat there and held his ground. Vince said he'd make sure Jeff was paid, but Jeff said he wanted the money wired into his account immediately before he brought his bag and the IC belt in. Otherwise, he was getting on a plane and going home. I always thought it was wrong to do that. I sort of understand where it was coming from because it sometimes took up to 6 months to get our checks from a pay-per-view. He was owed a lot of money, and I guess he was worried that Vince wouldn't pay him. Even so, you don't hold somebody up like that. Management had spent so much money building up that match as one of the main events that they couldn't turn it around. They had to deliver Jarrett versus China, and since Jarrett was the IC champion going in, he had Vince over a barrel. When Jarrett confirmed with his wife that the money, over $300,000, had arrived into his account, he brought his bag in, got dressed, and stayed away from everybody. Road Dogg, being the loyal friend he is, stayed by Jeff's side, and before his match, Jeff took his bag, set it by the door of the arena, and went to the ring. He did his job and put China over in a match that involved lots of household objects, including a big bag of flour. He came back, covered in that flour, walked past everybody, didn't say a word, grabbed his bag, and was gone. There it is. The story in general, well, there's different claims. Jarrett at one point said that he doubled the original offer in spite of JR, and in a recent interview with TalkSport, Jarrett shed light on this incident. Here it is. Well, here's what everybody misses. The real crux of the story is that I was a talent in 1999, and quote-unquote, I held Vince McMahon up for money. Is that what you're alluding to? But when you really drill that down and you really think about this, employee and employer, if he didn't want to pay me, he didn't have to pay me a cent, said Jarrett. And what was I going to do? Go sue him? He could tie me up in court, not for months, but for years, and I would have spent all the money I was owed, and then some, had he chosen not to pay me. So the fact of the matter is this, and to this day in conversation, look, I tried, and that was my whole point. Let's make this easy for everybody. Pay me everything that you owed me in the past, because at the time there were bonuses. It was October, and I was owed for September, August, July, probably June, and I think we did a pay-per-view over here called Rebellion in England. So I had a lot of money in the pipeline coming. I said, let's approximate on the payoffs. I've got all these house show runs I was on. Let's come up with a number and let me get out of your hair. I'm obviously not re-signing the offer, and that's a whole other set of circumstances. You go your way and I'll go my way. It made it easy on everybody. Now, my personal opinion on this, well, I side with Jarrett. Why? Well, who knows if Vince was going to pay him in full. He could just throw $20 in his bank account and say those are the bonuses. I remember John Moxley said that he received $80 for the Shield special last year, which is kind of petty in my opinion. Anyways, with that said, Jarrett managed to one-up Vince, and plus he was losing anyways. He wanted his pockets to be fatter, like he wanted to be rightfully compensated for that, and since he was heading to Atlanta to be with his good buddy Vince Russo, he wanted all of his money on the spot. He received it, and later that night he made China look like $1 million. Overall, this was one wild story. Jarrett himself is seen as a carny by many, but to me in this situation, he was right. If he walked out of there without his money intact, who knows if he would have received it, and even if he did, what if it was an unsatisfying amount? Jarrett wasn't sure he would receive the correct amount, and so he just demanded it on the spot, that's all. The next night it was on Monday Nitro, and he was destroying Beetlejuice with a guitar. There are many contrasting stories between Bruce Pritchard, Jeff Jarrett, Bob Holly, and China. One thing that's for sure is that Jarrett got one over Vince. I mean, if there wasn't heat between these two, then why did Vince fire him on live TV? Some say there wasn't heat. Like, if they just parted ways and all that, why wasn't Jeff brought in 2001? Like, why did he fire him on the spot? That's what I'm trying to say. This might have been due to Jarrett doubling the offer. Once again, so many different stories there. I'm not even sure which one's the correct one. Anyways, after being fired from the WWF, Jeff, along with his father, launched a promotion by the name of TNA. He launched a platform for stars such as AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode. He gave guys such as Christian Cage a chance, and while he was blacklisted from the WWE, it all worked out for Jarrett in the end. I mean, he did make himself champion a couple of times there, but he had some decent matches there, I'm not gonna lie. Some matches like the Kurt Angle one, that was one of the first TNA matches I watched ever. That was awesome. That no DQ match, yeah. I know there's all those stories of GFW and that gold stuff, but in the end, he was finally welcome to return to the WWE in 2018 to be a part of the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Honestly, if you know about that story, then it's a shocker. Scratch that. Hell, that's frozen over. How was Jeff Jarrett brought in? Like, this is a bigger story than the CM Punk one. He was blacklisted. Triple H was a major influence in bringing Double J back to the WWE, and he currently works as a producer, and all is good. So yeah, that's the story. Jeff Jarrett, he wanted the money that he was owed, or he wanted double of the initial offer in spite of JR. He wanted to piss him off. And later on, like, there was some heat on JR for letting this one slide. Like, he didn't renew Jeff's contract beforehand. He didn't notify him about it, and so he had heat. So yeah, that's the story. Jeff Jarrett, I personally believe he was right. He might have had to pay the price later on as Vince basically fired him on live TV, and so he had to build his own promotion. If he never took all that money away with him, I believe he would have been back in the WWE in 2001. So yeah. That's your first video. Make sure you hit the figure 4 on the like button and perhaps the stroke on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.